We are live.
Good. Very warm welcome to everybody, and very warm welcome to Nir Esterman, who's talking to us from Israel, in a place which I'm not quite sure where it is, but I know it's north of Tel Aviv. So welcome, Nir. So Nir is a teacher of family and systemic constellations and of shadow work. He's a body psychotherapist, and he leads workshops and trainings in systemic and shadow work, both for people in person and online. So today he's going to be talking about intergenerational healing, which is a fascinating subject. So welcome, Nir. Thank you very much for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So where do you want to start? I mean, it'd be interesting to know a little bit about your background and maybe how you got into this from a personal point of view. Was it a personal journey for you, this exploration of constellation work? And
well, the truth is that when I first came to a family constellation workshop, I was like, oh, I'm pretty much okay. But after 15 years of working on myself, I'll learn a new tool for my clients. 2 hours afterwards, I was crying my heart out and understanding that I have a new love. Enlisted for 2 programs simultaneously, and here we are today.
And that was in Israel, was it? Because I know there's a lot of different sort of approaches to constellation work. We've had Franz Ruppert. I don't know if he's developed his own way of working with this.
Yeah.
There's lots of different systems, but can you describe the system that you are most drawn to and that you teach?
So, like, both of my principal teachers were students of Bert Hellinger, the founder of Family Constellations. Both had some disagreements with him, as often happens in the second generation. But I would still say that I'm quite classical, meaning I'm very attached is the wrong word. I'm very connected to looking at things from a systemic point of view, to understanding the overall connections, including everything relevant. And this also connects very well with shadow work, which is also about radical inclusion. I guess I'm much less directive than the original constellations, where both because I'm a trauma therapist and working with lots of people with trauma, being directive is usually not a very good idea. And because I'm Israeli and we don't like to be told what to do. So both goes here. And I also come from many years of doing body work and through the body development. So I'm giving a lot of attention to how it all feels in the body and the nuances we can feel in the body when we do constellation work. And when we stand in for other people, it's not just what we think, it's what we are, it's who we become for these moments. And there is lots of information there.
Yeah. For those people who don't know what constellation work is, could you just describe it briefly, how it works, what the setup is?
Yeah. So traditional constellations are done in groups. A client is bringing an issue. Almost any issue can come into a constellation. And the facilitator listens with a practiced ear to the different things that helps him decide which are the main characters or main roles that are relevant to this issue. It can be a physical issue, even a back pain, or it can be a relationship issue or a family issue, or sometimes a mental issue. And then the facilitator would usually suggest several roles. For example, like the most classic family constellation would be to set a constellation of the family. So please choose someone to represent your mother, someone to represent your father, and someone to represent your siblings. And then a very interesting phenomena happens where people agree to take these roles. They actually feel and sense and sometimes think and want to move differently than before. It's like they know something from the field of the client, and they agree to let that knowledge guide them. And in a way, they're allowing or facilitating a new movement inside this client's body, mind, whatever. And so it's like we're taking the inside out and put it on a spatial level in some place, also in the internet, and it's possible. And the movement that happen physically, the changing of places, the things being said, the emotions being expressed, echo in a very powerful way in the soul and psyche and body of the client. And this facilitates very big changes, sometimes in very little time.
Yeah, something I've been fascinated in for a very long time, actually. So coming to the intergenerational healing, what does it? What can you describe what that is in a nutshell?
Yeah, so we are missing a word here, and the word is trauma. So it's actually intergenerational trauma healing. So when someone is having a trauma, be it like a big trauma, war, death, suicide, sexual abuse, having to immigrate from a country, leaving everything behind, losing lots of family or friends, Holocaust, can be personal or collective, or even if they just have very difficult fates, which are not necessarily traumatic, but it still shape their lives. And in a way, it affects who they are. And these people happen to be our ancestors. So whatever it is that they couldn't, for whatever reason, fully hold, fully digest, fully work with, is in some way transferred downward through the stream of life to their children and their children and their children. Something that's very clear, like when you really have like big collective trauma, I would take the example of the Holocaust because I'm a second generation on both sides. Both of my parents were small children in the Holocaust. My father lost his entire family. My mother was born in the ghetto and smuggled out and been without her parents for several years, and many other stories. So you see that the second generation is naturally much affected, either by significantly higher chance of receiving PTSD, or for example, the third generation, the grandchildren. There was a study in Canada where they were 300% more likely to be sent to psychiatric evaluation as children. You can have all kinds of references to it. You even have it in the Old Testament, like the fathers ate the tough fruit and the teeth of the children were affected by it. And some other versions, I'm pretty sure the New Testament has its versions of that. We see it in family therapy, for example. Often a child is taken to therapy because they have a problem. And then this child is actually known as the IP, the identified patient, the person who is carrying the issue for the entire family. And if we are willing to go beyond the living family to the ancestral path, to what happened in the generations before us, we very often see that what we thought of as our issues, and specifically the issues which are too big or feel infinite or overwhelming, like whatever we do, it doesn't help. They actually have very significant roots in prior generations. So to give a concrete example, you can have someone, I don't know, immigrate forcefully because it was fleeing for her life. She was fleeing for her life, and maybe also left a couple of brothers behind. And her daughter or her grandson keep feeling like they're not safe, like they have to be on the alert in some way, or they may be constantly feeling that someone is missing in their lives. Like they're not fully here because something is constantly missing. And at first people don't even notice it. They grow up with this sensation, but at some point they find the words for it, and the words are very indicative. It's like a part of me is missing. And it's not that I lost anybody, but my grandmother did. So hey, it affects me.
It's interesting that you're concentrating a lot on that so the second generation rather than the first, like you talked about the grandparents' trauma rather than the parents' trauma. Normally we think it's more related to the parents' trauma, right?
Yeah, so when we talk about the parents' trauma, it's really confusing because the transfer is on many ways. For example, maybe the father was in combat and he saw and participated in horrible things, and he got fucked up or has PTSD, if you want to use the professional way of saying it. So his children will experience a father which is maybe absent, maybe has temper outbursts, maybe is alcoholic. It's a little difficult to say if these are psychological, if the damage is more psychological, but still, so this is why I tend to give examples a little bit further away when it's more clear. But definitely, I once spoke with someone, and like often happens in constellation, a person gives an issue, and we start working with it, and at some point there is a sense, a smell, a sensation, a feeling of something beyond. So I'm pretty sensitive, so I often feel it like either I see an image. I was once working with a friend on actually his combat PTSD trauma, and we just couldn't touch the trauma. Something was not available, which happens with trauma. And then I said, stop. I want to have a look at it in my mind's eye. And in my mind's eye, I was seeing Siberian wasteland. I was like, what is the connection? So I asked this friend, say, do any of your ancestors from Russia, from Siberia? He's like, yeah, my grandfather was sent to Siberia for 3 years to work in camps. And I consider my army service to be 3 years of working in a camp. I never thought about that. For example, or I met with some other guy who was really had like lots of anxiety issues, and we saw that the basic sensation in the body was really alert, and then he didn't do anything dangerous in his entire life, but his father was leading a force in one of the Israeli wars, and you could feel this sensation in the child body of, I have to be alert, I have to protect the people behind me, I have to lead this force forward no matter what, I have to reach the objectives, and like there's not much place for me, there's just place for what I have to do. And I didn't know all of that because it didn't come up in the initial inquiry, but I could feel that. And then I asked him if there is a history of being in war. He was like, yeah, my father was this and that. And then a change could come. And it comes in all ways. Sometimes, like I really have like colors for the Holocaust, a certain grayscale, or it can be something I never experienced or heard of, but I sense it in my body, and when I describe it, or the other representative describe the sensations to the client, they're like, whoa, how can it be? You're talking exactly like my mother. You're using the same sentences and you never met even me. Or you're having a back pain exactly like my father, and you deal with it in your body in the same way like my father, but again, I didn't even speak about him. So there is this field around us which let us know, and this field goes, it's like the family field, the family subconscious field, if you like, or the entire energetic fields of human being, and it's interconnected, and things, like if I pull a thread of this tapestry, it is pulled all the way. I don't have to take it out, but the stress I'm putting on it will be felt alongside the entire thread. So it can be the next generation, it can be 4 or 5 generations, but it is still felt.
Mm. So the way you work with it, is it mostly through constellation work? 'Cause I know you're also a body psychotherapist, so you presumably you work with the body a lot with this, right? Do you
Yeah,
use hands-on as well? How do you, or do you
yeah.
use a variety of different approaches then?
Let me see. It's interesting. I've done probably 15 years of body psychotherapy, and before getting the constellation, so it was like, okay, I'm pretty much okay with working with the body with almost anything, my body for myself. And then there is whole new layer opening of the intergenerational stuff and things that now I understand why I never go out of home without thinking, will I have something to eat? It changed, by the way. Um, so it was like first immersing myself in this new thing before connecting, and connection is coming. So I think that as a body therapist, sometimes when you touch the body, especially if we do it in a very gentle and sensitive way, we tap into the layers of the body. We can sense something which is not just physical. I mean, it is expressed in the fascia or in other tissues. But the sensation when we touch it, it's like, oh, it feels like I'm meeting something old. Like it's not completely from now. So it's not just a physical touch. It's like sensing the experience that is held in the tissue. And then I can choose, for example, and actually when, thank you for this question. When I'm thinking about it, I think that many times, even before I connected with constellations, I would work with clients. I would feel something in their body. I would feel that they are not able to work with it fully. And I would feel the echo of this in my body, including some images or some ancestral information. And for example, I don't know what is going on, but it feels like I'm stuck. Oh, so the client is in some way going through an experience of being stuck. And I know this client for 2 years. It never came up before, but it's here very strong. So I can ask the client, but I can also work with the experience. And often I receive an image of someone or something, or an event, or the essence of an event. And then I ask the clients, and they tell me, yeah, my grandfather had that, my mother had that, my sister did that. And sometimes, the intergenerational is not always in the past generation. Sometimes it's this generation. If my mother had, I don't know, 2 miscarriages and an abortion, does it affect me? Well, it does. And it is felt in the body. It is felt in how I organize my body as being the first child or the third, one of 3 or one of 6, right?
So how would you say these things show up as maybe physical kind of symptoms? You talked about sort of back pain, things like that.
Yeah. So of course it's very specific. So I'll try to give some examples. Sometimes it feels like a very strong push or pull, like something is constantly pushing you downwards. So it can take the form of emotional pull.
You're talking about a client now, like how they feel in their body, yeah?
Yeah, the client says, yeah, I don't have strength. I keep looking down. They tell me I'm depressed, but the physical sensation is I'm going down. Like I want to lie down on the floor. I want to melt with the earth. I want to sleep forever. And I'm giving you the words, but the entire body sensation is slow and tired and down. And it tells us that probably there are some missing dead people in the family. People whose death was not properly acknowledged in a good way. And when someone goes away from the family and is not properly acknowledged, it leaves like a black hole. So something keeps pulling us into this black hole, and some of us will feel the pull. Some of us will not feel the pull, we feel the push away from it. Like, I have to go forward. I always look to the future, and I always plan ahead. And the body would be like these photos of the new, like the communist photos of the new farmer. Like, I'm looking into the future, and I have to look into the future, because if I look down, I will not be able to stand what I see. Sometimes it feels like a pain. I mean, people can describe it feels like I've been stabbed, but I've never been stabbed. Or people can describe something in the knees, like they're not stable. And of course we can touch it from many directions, but one of the layers that it's good to chat to ask about is, okay, so knees has so much to do with our balance, with our sense of safety on the ground, and with fear. So what is it that the knees are holding? And sometimes it will be an emotion, sometimes an experience from this life. And very often, in addition to the emotion experience from this life, there will be like an infrastructure that comes from a prior generation. And this infrastructure is often what makes the current experience much worse. Because many times a person can come to us and say, yeah, you know, I had a car accident, and since then I have some aches. Okay, fine. So it makes sense. I had, I don't know, a disc protrusion. I hope I pronounce it well. A disc injury, and since then my back is aching. I'm like, okay, let's have a look at that. And you're holding your body around that ache. Yeah, okay. What is the experience there? That I have to hide myself. Okay, that's interesting. How is it connected to the accident? I'm not sure it is. When I kind of think of it, I always felt that I want to be seen, but I have to hide myself. And then you go back, and maybe it's a childhood issue, and maybe it's an intergenerational issue, and it's often both. And when you go to the both, you see, for example, an ancestor. If you go a long way back, and I had a couple of sessions like that recently, people saying they feel like they have some witch in the ancestry, or someone who was burned for being thought of being a witch, and they feel like if they show their true colors, if they show how big they are, if they show that they think differently, believe differently, and have some strange abilities most people don't have. Which is what I want to do, you know. They want to be acknowledged for what they can bring us. They're amazing healers very often, but I have to hide it in some way, because someplace out there something happened, and it can be for a totally different reason and not so collective. Okay, it can be that my grandfather, I don't know, was fired from his work because he was leading. What it's called, and he was trying to organize the workers, so he was fired. And the lesson going down in my family is that don't raise your head too much. If you go against the higher ups, you'll find yourself without work. So hey.
Martha is asking here about, well, she's just observing that a lot of what you say relates to soul surviving twins, and more of us than we know are one. And yes, there is always somebody missing in your life then. So this is I think also you mentioned about this thing about feeling as though something's missing or something.
Yeah.
Like that, yeah? So I'm wondering, when you're talking about this, because there are so many layers to trauma, aren't there? And what seems to happen is that we tend to kind of re-experience the same kind of events in different kind of situations. So you could say that some trauma is related to intergenerational, but it also might be recapitulated in the womb, or it might be recapitulated at certain events in your life. I'm just wondering how you differentiate those out, rather than being too I think you said at the beginning you don't want to be directive. Yeah.
Yeah. So my secret signs are as follows. One I already gave before. It's a sensation that whatever it is bigger than ourselves. That it's infinite. There is a difference between feeling I'm scared to the feeling of having like a severe anxiety. And it's not just it's bigger. It's like between something which is finite, maybe big. I have lots of fear, but I can see the end of it. If I cannot see the end of it, it usually means that a part of it is beyond me. This is why I cannot see the end of it. You can have this sensation when things are like you touch them over and over again. So someone, I don't know, touches the pain about being a lonely child or the loss of a mother, and they touch it and they cry and it's slightly better, but then it's coming again and again and again. It's like something isn't being touched, and it feels like it's a drop in the, and every drop is big and meaningful, but it's a drop in sea. Actually, you can see it, for example, in the coronavirus reactions now. So people have lots of reactions. Make sense? And but I did a survey on Facebook, and it was like, what is it that most bothers you about a situation? So for some people, they are afraid for their lives or the lives of the family. Some other people, it's the loss of freedom. For some other people, it's not the freedom; it's the staying at home. They don't mind. They don't mind the freedom, not being free, but they can't stay at home as much. For some people, it's being told what to do. For some other people, it's the sensation that something is hidden. They don't know everything. And when you look at it, you see that each one of them, of this issue, lead to a different intergenerational stuff. So if it's okay with people, if you think it's okay, I would like to lead you through a short structure in your mind. It's a little bit powerful. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. But it's a structure about making a distinction between the collective trauma layer that we all react to in some way, and our personal this day reaction. Would you like me to do that?
Yes, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, so first some basic rules, safety rules. They're pretty simple. You don't have to do anything I say. Okay, so these are all suggestions. If you want to do something differently, that's okay. If you want not to do that, also okay. That said, if you can, please try to walk with me, because I don't even see you to know that you're doing something different. So I won't be able to supply you with different instructions if you need them. Okay, so it's a very clear structure. It will take us probably 7 to 10 minutes maximum. Yeah, so take a relaxed seat. Take a few breaths as full as you like them to be, just to touch down with yourself, with your body, with whatever it is that you're sitting on. Take a moment to sense the soles of your feet, to ground yourself, to center yourself. We will shortly go to a short journey in your mind's eye, in where we'll be speaking with your subconscious and your family and collective subconscious. It only works to the degree that you allow it to work, and if you don't allow it fully, that's perfectly okay. Let us begin. In your mind's eye, ask your subconscious to choose something to represent yourself. It can be a human figure, or actually your figure. It could be any object or any vague thing that your subconscious raises to represent yourself. The object itself or the image itself doesn't matter as long as you can feel it represents you. And again, in your mind's eye, ask for something that represents the situation. And the situation can be for you the corona or the shutdown or the economic disaster or whatever it is that for you is the issue, is the situation. And you don't even have to know what it is. Just trust your subconscious to supply what we need. And now imagine yourself sort of floating over to your presentation, getting in touch with it until you occupy the same space. So now you're in the role of yourself, in this small system of yourself and the situation. And pay attention. Pay attention to your body, to your felt sense. Does anything draws or pulls you to any direction? How is your weight? Do you have any body sensations? Anything is contracting or relaxing? What does your body or body parts wants to do? Where is your attention going? Inside, outside, to the situation, to someplace else? How emotional are you now, and with what emotions are you in touch mostly? Do you see any images or any short videos, any sounds, any song? Do you experience something either familiar or not? Know to yourself whatever it is that comes to you. And now step off, take yourself away from your representation. Take a breath in and breath out to fully let go. And then float yourself to be in touch with the situation, with the representation of the situation. And take a moment to step on this representation or to connect with it. Breathe and pay attention to the same things. How do they feel now? The body level, the emotional level, the thoughts, the mind, the attention, the energetic level. How does the situation feel? What does the situation wants to do? Where is the attention of the situation is going? You don't have to do anything, just allow it to be impressed on yourself and then step off. Take a breath and now add a third representation. A representation for the effect the situation has on you. And you don't need to know what is the effect. Maybe you know, maybe you don't. Just ask your insides to give this representation a form and position it somewhere in your mind's eye in relation to the first two representations. And when you do that, maybe something wants to move or change the relative position, or maybe the representation, the first two representations are changing in some way. If it happens, allow it. It's a part of the process. And if it doesn't happen, it's also okay. Now float into the effect of the situation on you, representation. To what degree are you able to connect with it? How big does it feel? How heavy or light? How easy or difficult? Is it overwhelming or not so much? Is it finite or infinite in the way it feels? Just note all these sensations. If you don't have an answer for a question, that's perfectly fine. Just go to another one. And take a breath and step off this representation. Take another breath. For some of you, this representation was a bit difficult or a bit overwhelming. That's okay. The fourth representation we will have now, invite now, is a representation for the most ancient collective trauma that is the root of the effect that the current situation has on you. And you do not need to know what it is. And it may be something that you know or think or is familiar to you, and it can be completely different. For myself, the story of Noah's Ark was the key, but I don't know what it is for you. And after you position this representation where it feels right, step on, connect with it. And allow whatever sensations and images, whatever information to come to you. Maybe it will be very clear. Maybe it will be messy. Maybe it will be more like a string of associations or images. Maybe more like different body sensations or energetic sensations. And you can always just disengage if it's too much. Take a breath. In your mind's eye, look at the representation of the effect and allow it to turn towards this representation, towards the ancient collective trauma representation, and then disengage and go back to the representation of the effect. Breathe in and connect with it, and sense what is happening. Is there any exchange of something, of energies if you like, between these two representations? Has anything changed in the effect representation when we added the collective trauma? If anything wants to move, to change position, relative or absolute, or if you notice any changes in the representations, in the size, shape, composition, texture, just allow it. Allow the movement. Now if it feels right for you, you can bow your head a little bit, as if acknowledging that before this effect has affected you, there was something much bigger, much more ancient, which paved the way for this effect. So we're just acknowledging it without trying to change anything. But it's possible when you bow down a little bit or much, if you feel like it, that you will feel something sliding off your shoulders. And if it happens, allow it as well. Take a moment to notice what changes are happening, if any are happening. Step away from this representation and go back to be in touch with your own representation. If anything wants to move, allow the movement. How are you now? Has anything changed for you? How do you feel now towards the situation? How do you feel towards the effect? Is it affecting you in the same way, to the same degree? How do you feel towards this ancient collective trauma? For some of us at this point is enough, but for some of us we just need one more presentation for support or a resource. So I invite you all, it's always helpful, to ask for one last representation. Something that will support us. It can be a person, an essence, something very specific or very general. Anything that would make us feel more supported and more resourced. And put it behind us in our mind's eye, behind our representation. And breathe. And see if it helped, if it changed anything, if it allowed some new movement or new option or opportunity. For some of you, you would feel the need to add more than one, and that's okay. It's good. Add as many as you like. And when you're ready, you can gently disengage from your representation. Take a breath. And then gently disengage from this entire in the mind eye constellation. Take a deeper breath if you like. Get back to your body here and now. Get back to the sense of your bottom sitting on something, on the sole of the soles of your feet. Move your body a little bit, stretch. Drink a sip of water or tea if you like. Yeah. How are you? Feel free to write in the comments, or if you, John, anyone wants to say or ask anything, please feel free.
Wonderful, thank you. Yes, so if you've got any comments, please put them in the chat. That'd be great. Or Shannon, if you want to say anything. A lot of people saying. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. It was so interesting doing that because I realized that this situation in my family goes back a long, long way on both sides, where there were so many alcoholics and a lot of suicide. And I always thought it was, when I was younger, I always wanted to be part of a Mexican family because a Mexican family, because they're so, you know, or Italian, you know, they're so, you know, amore, and, you know, they're all like
lively,
yeah. And I love you, I hate you, I love you, I hate you, all that. My family wasn't like that at all. My family was like, be proper, do the right thing, don't say anything, don't rock the boat, all that alcoholic stuff. Don't tell anybody anything. You know, be quiet. Just, in other words, don't be there. Just, and I had that sense, that really strong sense of that going back a lot of generations to those people who didn't know how to connect emotionally. So it's a lot of people that have no emotional connection.
I'm having shivers in my spine when you speak, which is usually a sign of truth.
Didn't know how to verbalize that before, but I got that so much from this exercise.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was very powerful.
Yes, very often both suicides and addictions have a lot to do with this hole I mentioned before. And so from a family constellation perspective, it's strange, but we don't look at people who commit suicide as people who couldn't handle this world. We look at them as people who were drawn to be back in touch with missing people in the family. And I've seen more than once how suicidal pull, like people say, I don't want to suicide, but something is pulling me there. Or in some other cases, I already have a plan 2 weeks from now, which was really scary, this one. And in many cases, when we manage to pinpoint the origin of the black hole, what was there before it was a black hole, which was sucking all life into it, there was a significant change in the pool. I can't say it always completely changed, okay? Because probably all of us have lots of dead people in our families. But when you identify the main ones, there is a dramatic possibility of change in this pool, and it's one of the most amazing healings in my experience. Yeah, so thank you for bringing this.
Thank you.
Shayla's asking, oh, sorry, Vicky was saying, I had difficulty imagining the supportive essence representation. Any thoughts on that?
I'm a therapist. Of course, I have thoughts on that. Let's see. Well, I don't know you, and I wouldn't want to guess for you, but so I'll answer in general. Sometimes it's that we have a lack of support in our family. We don't feel the support of our parents or ancestors, and then we ask for support, and we don't know the feeling that well enough. So we need more precise instruction to go there, or we need to solve something first so that we will feel more supported. And sometimes it's possible that the concept of support is not clear enough in your mind to get that. So maybe something about my instruction or the way it interacted with your understanding. And sometimes some self parts of ourselves are not willing to be supported because it will challenge their worldview. So they actually block us from being supported until we change something else first. These are like 3 directions that comes to my mind off the hat, on the top of my head. I would need to hear some more information to give more specific answers.
Darina is saying she's from Northern Ireland, and I was going to ask you this about what you see in different cultures. Obviously, Israel has its own thing.
Yeah.
But we all do. England has a very long history. I mean, I can trace my history back to the Crusaders. Like my personal line goes back to the Knights Templar actually, and Crusaders. A lot of them are buried in Jerusalem.
Sarah John Wilkes.
Yeah, a lot of them are buried in Jerusalem. So it's interesting. But Darina is asking about, say, in Northern Ireland. You probably know the history of Northern Ireland. It's had a lot of troubles. She's saying that she notices more anxiety and stress in the children born after the troubles than during the troubles.
Yeah, so I would say that children born during the troubles had to shut it all in, and it would probably come out in different ways. But the next generation who grew up in a relatively safer environment is expressing more, and we see it all around. I mean, we have in Israel the example of first, second, third, and fourth generation of the Holocaust, but the same goes if you look at the famine in Ireland, not only the terrorists and the war with England. You see it everywhere. You see it in Rwanda after the massacres. It's like, I don't think they suffer from it more, just that they show it more because they're in a safer environment. This would be my first guess, like on a very broad level. And I guess I can even see it like with my children. Like I was a good child, and my parents are and my parents are amazing, but there are limits I could sense without ever being told to what is allowed to be even felt emotionally, because they had their limitation because of what they went through. But my children, they have a voice. Loud and clear, and they will also have their issues, of course, and many of the things that I see them going through, I can definitely trace to my issues and to my parents and my grandparents' issues. So it's like these hot potatoes. If whatever I don't catch will go to them. Okay, so this is one of the biggest motivations for me, by the way. I mean, for myself, I can manage. So I'll be limited in some ways. So I'm good enough. But I don't want them to suffer this way. I don't want them to carry my stuff this way. If I'm not in touch with my anger, then my children will be. If I'm not in touch with my anxiety, my children will be. If I'm not in touch with my aggression, my children will be. Can't help that.
You talked about collective trauma and personal trauma.
Yeah.
Can you describe the different, or like, does it matter in terms of like what you're working with or what comes up?
Well, it won't necessarily matter much for a technique. And the technique may be very similar, but when we are not aware of the collective trauma and we work with the personal trauma, sometimes we just cannot touch or cannot access, or we cannot affect certain changes in the system, because the collective trauma is there, and it's like, until you acknowledge us, nothing is going to move. Or the collective trauma it often has like an oppressive weight. It's huge. So it's not that I mean, we all have both collective and personal intergenerational trauma. So no surprise here. Sorry. But sometimes it's the personal that will come, and sometimes it's the collective that will call for attention. And sometimes it just, like with some people, let's say there is, again, I like half my Israeli clients have Holocaust roots, so lots of examples from there. But I can work with someone and the Holocaust comes up, and there is her grandmother which was hiding in a cellar for the entire war, or was in Auschwitz and lost 9 sisters and whatever. And that's her personal story. And it all feels dark and heavy and oppressive, and it's too much and we can't handle it. And like, okay, let's put a representation for the Holocaust. And suddenly it's like, do you remember this old movie Ghostbusters? They used to put these like traps, these boxes that would catch the ghost inside them, the bad energy of the ghost. And the feeling is a little bit similar. It's like suddenly, instead of filling the entire room and beyond, it's like, okay. It's about the Holocaust, or about the famine, or about this massacre or pogrom or whatever. And suddenly, like the work we did here before a few minutes ago, there is a distinction, there is a disentanglement between the personal story and the collective story. And this allows us to, for once, be less affected by the collective trauma, and secondly, it allows us to touch the personal trauma in a safer and more fuller way. So more healing is available when we acknowledge the collective layer when we need to.
Doreen is asking also if this is a little bit, it obviously needs a lot of sensitivity, this work, but she was asking if it's a little bit shamanic in its approach, really.
Yes, family constellation has shamanic roots, family therapy roots, gestalt roots, psychotherapy roots, spiritual roots. Bert Hellinger was a priest. He has roots from being forced to be a soldier in the German army. Different kinds of roots in there, but definitely shamanic roots. And in a way, family constellation, when it's done like in the fullest way, it's not a process, it's a ceremony. And a shamanic ceremony in its essence allows healing to be done in one time. And the effects can take some time, but the healing is done directly. So it's different from psychological process. It's complementary to it. Like everyone should have both. And body work. And
Natalia is asking, can you speak about boundaries in the therapy room when you were so sensitized in the field with the client in this way?
Come to learn. There's a lot to talk about boundaries. In 2 words, the places in which we don't have proper boundaries has to do with our shadows and with our unacknowledged and undigested stuff. And these are the places when we are like captured by things which happen and we're not full in our capacity. Every time until now, so that's like hundreds or thousands of sessions, every time when I felt that something is going beyond the boundary, I could trace it to something on my side which wasn't acknowledged properly. And when I did acknowledge it, oh, okay, I'm back to myself. Yeah, we need to be well connected to do it well. But actually, there are very practical practices to do it well. So you don't have to rely just on your intuition. I would say that the part of learning is to be captured more than once. And then you learn how it feels to be captured the same way that you learn how to feel transference and how to learn projective identification, how it feels. And when you feel it enough, oh, I know this sensation. Okay, I know what to do about it as well. I work with it a lot when I teach shadow work and shadow constellations.
Thank you. Shaila's just sharing some of her history in Ireland. She says, my collective trauma image went back to the famine in Ireland. My ancestors survived, but millions died terrible deaths. It was really helpful to move between the different constellations and to feel the shifts as they're related to each one. And Carola is also talking about her, she's German, and I'm so-called in Germany, the war grandchildren. My grandfather was in the resistance and fought with Tito against the Nazis. He had his feet frozen when they were hiding in the cold woods. I have my whole life ice cold feet. I'm loved my grandfather very much, but I don't have trust. There's always doubt and a sense of something bad will come, even though I have a very good life. I'm missing so much of feeling that I can trust and all will be good.
It's actually this is the kind of thing that I've seen and heard change in this kind of healing work. Both the physical symptoms, it's like you're carrying your grandfather's cold. I once met someone whose grandfather was in the French resistance, and after we talk about it and explored it a bit, he asked his all his what it's called, not brothers and sisters, but all his cousins, and they were all feeling like I don't know how many of them feeling they have to hide themselves, hide their true identity. So these things, and it changes. It changes when we do the work.
So one last question, if that's all right, Neil, before we stop.
Sure.
Christine is asking about connecting with past generation links. Would you also consider a reincarnation link, one's own experience from a previous lifetime? Should this concept be an actual reality?
Well, I can't tell, but I've worked with situations like that and with many other kinds of situations which I couldn't tell if they were true or not, but it didn't matter because they feel as truth in the client system. And if they feel as truth, I will work with them. I don't care if it's past incarnations, if it's aliens, if it's ancestors, if it's something else. It doesn't really matter. I don't claim to know the truth. I know that if we take seriously what people feel and sense, then healing happens. And that's enough for me.
Thank you. We had Thomas Verney recently at a conference in, I don't know if you know Thomas Verney's work, but he's done quite a bit about intergenerational trauma and things like that. And there's a lot of research on this, looking at health effects through, which, as you said, go back several generations sometimes. There was a very famous one to do with the Dutch famine, where they tracked, and you probably know that study when, you know.
There's a lots of epigenetic research on that. So it's not just energetic or soul level, it's also very biological and practical.
Sure. And interesting that some of that comes down through the maternal line and some through the paternal line. And because often we tend to concentrate on the maternal line, particularly, for example, we tend to stress as baby therapists, we tend to concentrate on things like, you know, stress during pregnancy, or incidents that happen during pregnancy, or the incidents that happen at birth.
Well, if the father had serious trauma and has PTSD, it will affect the sperm in some way, and it will go to the children, even if the children never knew the father. So it's beyond psychological. It's biological, epigenetic, and as we saw, energetic or soul level.
Yeah. And obviously that kind of thinking has not really filtered through to, you would say, mainstream reproductive medicine.
Unfortunately, not yet.
Right.
But you know, but you know, when you come to think of it, when a woman goes to the hospital when she's carrying a baby, she's not asked how many pregnancies, how many births you had. She's asked how many pregnancies you had. So, you know, they know something there intuitively.
Sure.
And then they really, you know, they're smart people. They may have sometimes limited conceptions, but they're really smart and dedicated people. And I think that over time, more and more information will cross into the normal channels as well. At least I hope so. One can only hope.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Thank you. Of course. Do you think that, you know, there's children that have really serious night terrors, or they sleepwalk or whatever? Do you think that this is an unconscious demonstration of perhaps some of this generational? Could it be that they're sort of acting out because, you know, they're so, they can go in and out so easily in their emotions?
It could definitely be. I can't tell, you know, generally. I have to check each case separately. But generally, I can definitely tell that children, sometimes at a very young age, describe things they see and feel, which are exactly what happened to their parents, grandparents, etc., and to a frightening degree. So definitely very possible. And also we see that when people do, very often parents come to do the work for the children because the children are too small. And it's enough that the parents do the work and the children change or get better, or depends.
Yeah, that's interesting. When the parents do the work, then the children get the benefit of it.
Yes, of course. As I said before, we carry something together. So if I carry more of that, it's actually not mine. I'll let my grandparents or their parents to carry what's theirs, and the grandparents what's theirs, and my parents what's theirs, and me what's mine. There's little left for the kids. They can have their own lives.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So Nir will be back with us on the 21st of May to talk about shadow work in therapy, which is very interesting. And we also have tomorrow the first part of a 3-part course with Dirk Olibran, who's going to be talking about the alchemy of bodywork, rediscovering the origin of conscious touch. So if you'd like to sign up for that, please just go to EHealth Learning or embodiedhealthlearning.com. Thank you very much, Nir. That was really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If I just may add one thing, if you're
Yeah.
interested in hearing more from me, you're welcome to my fresh website, nearesterman.com. It's not completely ready, but it's almost there, and you're welcome to have a look and leave your email there if you want to hear more about activities and more information. I try to write my ideas and suggestions and tips.
Brilliant. It's at nearesterman.com. Nearesterman.com. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So much.
See you again.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.